There was a German, a Frenchman, and a Jew were captured by the I don't know, bad guys, cannibals, whatever. It's just a joke. Don't worry. They weren't really captured. It's just a joke. And so they were brought before the firing squad, and they were given the request for their last meal. Last meal. So they asked the German, "What's your last meal?" And he said, "I would like some bratwurst and beer." So they got him bratwurst and beer, and they shot him. And then they asked the Frenchman, "What's your last meal?" He says, "I would like a baguette and red wine." And they got him a baguette and red wine, and they shot him. And they asked the Jew, "What's your last meal?" He says, "Strawberries." They said, "Strawberries? Strawberries aren't in season right now." The Jew says, "No, I'll wait." Okay. An interesting thing in Parshas Shlach regarding the setting of the story. We know where it takes place. It takes place in the wilderness. And the Jews are going into the land, or at least representatives of the Jews, the spies, are going into the land to check it out, and then they come back to the wilderness and they report. That's where it takes place. When does it take place? Well, it takes place when the Jews are in the wilderness, right? But more specifically, if you can pinpoint it to a time, and by the way, time-wise, we do know they came back on Tisha B'Av. Right? Okay. And it was a 40-day trip. So we can work out through different clues approximately what time of year it was, but that's not how the Torah describes it. Torah tells us when it wants to set the scene, every story has to have a setting. When it wants to set the scene, what does it tell us? It tells us, V'hayomim, in those days, Yemei Bikurei Anovim. Those days were the days of the ripening of the grapes. In other words, those were the days when the grapes are in season. Okay. Why is it important for us to know that this story takes place when the grapes are in season? First of all, when Moshe Rabbeinu sent them, he told them, "Ulakachtem mipri haaretz," take from the fruit of the land, meaning any kind, a few different kinds. So it wasn't specifically grapes that they had to bring back. And in fact, you see, they brought back various different species. And this is the second of all. The second of all is, apparently from the fact that they brought back various different species, those species were in season as well. So it wasn't just the ripening of the grapes. Apparently, other fruits were ripe at the same time. So why does the Torah emphasize that the setting of the story is in specifically the days of the ripening of the grapes? Okay, fine. So I don't know, what's your patience level? You want to hear the answer at the end, or you want to hear it right away? Want to come back to it, or you want to hear it right now? What?
Yeah, so we don't forget the question.
You don't want to forget the question, so you just want to hear right away. Okay, fine, no problem. It's a democracy here. We'll do whatever the people want. So I'll give you the answer right up front. A grape is an interesting fruit. It has a very thin skin. Very thin skin. Translucent skin. You can see through the grape skin. And that's different than many other fruits. I mean, picture, think of some of the other fruits that the spies brought back, like a pomegranate. You can't see through a pomegranate. It's a very opaque and thick shell, of course. You're not able to see through it. Or a fig. Can't see through a fig. But not really. Yeah. I mean, we should have brought a light board. Like the kashrus people with the romaine lettuce with the bugs on the light board. We should have brought a light board. But a grape, if you hold a grape up to the light, you can see the seed inside. I did this once actually for a group of kids. and I went out, I was such a good teacher. I went out and I bought grapes at the store. You know what's going to happen? You know what? You see what's coming? I went out and I bought grapes, and they were seedless grapes. So I couldn't illustrate the point. But the point would have been, if they would have had seeds like normal grapes, is that if you hold a grape up to the light, you can see the seed inside. What's the point? The point is that, there's something in Kabbalah called Clipa. Clipa is a byword for negativity. And Clipa literally means shell or peel. So why is negativity called a shell or a peel? Because essentially everything is godly and everything is good, because everything was created by Hashem for a purpose. It's just a matter of revelation and concealment. Some things, they're very obvious how they are giving glory to Hashem. And those things have no covering, no peel, so to speak. And we call that Kedusha, we call that holiness. Then there are other things where you look at it like, why does this even exist in God's world? Where the covering, meaning the form in which it exists in this world, is very opaque. So you can't even see that it's God's creation. Maybe it even looks like something that's rebelling against God's plan, which is really impossible, because if God made it, it's part of his plan. But the point is that we call that a Clipa. And sometimes in Kabbalah we talk about the Shalosh Clipas Atameas, the three utterly impure Clipas, which are, by the way, correspond to the different, if you've ever seen a walnut growing from a tree. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they look like tennis balls. They're green. Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw a walnut from a tree. But the shell that we're used to seeing is already second shell.
That's the pit.
Well, the outer shell that we identify as the shell, that's really the second shell, not the first shell. There are really three shells that are inedible. And then there's a thin little membrane, which is edible. That's like the Klipas Noiga. Klipas Noiga means the translucent or the shiny Klipa. The planet Venus is called Noiga because it shines. Yeah. So Noiga means to shine. So there are Shalosh Klipas Tameis, three utterly irredeemable Klipas, which you can see when you look at a walnut. It has three levels that are inedible, irredeemable. You can't use them. And then there's the thin membrane, which is it's not the nut itself, but it's an edible membrane. That's like Klipas Noiga. Klipas Noiga is the neutral category, and it's called Klipas Noiga because you can sort of, metaphorically, see the spark of godliness in it. The spark of godliness is an open and like in something that's kedusha, something that's holy. You look at it. You look at a Sefer Torah. And you don't have to, you have a lot of imagination to see how this is useful for the service of Hashem. An object that is Kaddish, that is holy, you look at it and you say, in the form that it's in right now, it is very obvious how this is in service of Hashem. Then there are things that you look at and they're so covered over with the form in which they exist in this world, you say, how could that ever be for the service of Hashem? And though, by the way, those things, how do we use them to serve Hashem? Because if everything was created for Hashem's glory, then it has to also have a role. Yeah, what's the role of something like that? Avoiding it. Avoiding it, leaving it alone, right? So, and then there's the vast majority of the physical world is Klipas Noigas, the neutral stuff. So, you look at the cup of coffee, it's not holy, meaning it's not overtly like, oh, this is a holy object, like, we have to treat it with reverence, like there's nothing holy about it. On the other hand, it's not prohibited. No one put anything in my coffee, right? Okay, so then it's not prohibited, okay, which would mean the only relationship I could have with it would be to avoid it, stay away from it. It's just sort of neutral. It's Klipas Noiga, which means that if you have vision, if you're creative, you can sort of look at it and you can think, oh, I see, I can take this ordinary mundane thing that's not holy or profane, it's just sort of spiritually neutral, and I can drink it, and I can use the energy, or the caffeine there that's making my brain work faster, and I can teach some Torah and elevate the energy there. So that's called Klipas Noiga. Now, if you remember, the whole story of the Meraglim was really, on a spiritual level, a story of coming of age for our people, where we had to make the transition from a purely theoretical Judaism to a practical Judaism. And that was a difficult transition. because many of the elite, many of the most spiritually evolved people wanted Judaism to remain theoretical. And they were happy to remain in the Midbar. Not only they were happy to, they preferred to remain in the Midbar because they had the Torah already. The Torah had already been given at Sinai. So they can just study Torah, they can contemplate on its truths. And what are they going to gain by entering the land? What, mitzvahs maisias, practical implementation of mitzvahs? What do we need that for? You know what kind of headache that brings? And all the types of, city building and infrastructure and agriculture, and what do we need it for? Right now we're in yeshiva, we're fed by mon that rains upon us. We have the water from the Ber Shel Miriam. So why should we enter the land and get caught up in all types of mundane stuff, which is going to distract us from spirituality? And that's why they feared it. They didn't fear military defeat because they already knew that from experience that they could have a miraculous victory. They feared the greatest enemy that they feared at this point was not a military foe. It was the very nature of the physical world to consume us. In fact, that's what they described it as. They said that the land, it devours its inhabitants. They didn't mean the land so much as the earthliness, the worldliness devours its inhabitants. So they didn't want any of that. They didn't want to become pulled away from the spiritual truths. And so that's why they came back and they said, it's not a good idea. Skip it. And Moshe Rabbeinu basically told them, you guys missed the whole point of Judaism, because the whole point is to practice Taryag mitzvahs, 613 commandments, souls in bodies, in this world, making use of physical objects, thereby refining the physical world, elevating the Klipas Noiga into Kedusha every time we use resources around us, whether it's the money that we spend on procuring the objects for a mitzvah, or it's the objects themselves, it's the lulav and esrog that we shake, or it's the cowhide that we use for a mezuzah, or it's the bricks you use to build a yeshiva. All these physical objects, when they're enlisted in the performance of a mitzvah, so they get upgraded, they get elevated from their default setting, which is the mundane klipas noiga, to kedusha, and then they become overtly. See, the interesting thing is they remain physical, and yet they reveal that they are part of Hashem's plan. If the only way things became holy was to ship them up to heaven, what's the point there? Beam me up Scotty, right? You have to get rid of the physical stuff in order for it to be holy. No, the whole point is that in the physical world, remaining physical, these things can be converted into holiness by being put to use in the proper way. And that's what Yiddishkeit is about. It's about entering the land, leaving the comfy midbar and going into the land and getting involved in all types of day-to-day mundane stuff. Now, I'll mention that this is one of the differences between men and women. That men tend to think of religious life as purely spiritual, almost like an escape from day-to-day life, run to the shul and go be spiritual. And of course I'm overgeneralizing, because that's what a generalization is, but women tend to have a certain innate sensitivity to the fact that real religious life is everywhere, all times, whatever you're doing. You don't have to go to a special place. You don't have to be in a special mode. Everything you do, even if it's like cooking and cleaning and taking care of kids, even mundane stuff that, it's not thrilling and not glorious stuff. It's a lot more glorious to go to shul and be the chazan, or to get an aliyah. These things are, very glorious and they feel very spiritual, but that's not the limit of what religious life is. For a Jew, religious life is in all manners of being, everything that we do. And so, at any rate, one of the differences between men and women is that men tend to be, the Kabbalah explains it as the difference between Zoh and Malchus, that men tend to seek spiritual escapism, and women tend to see how godliness can be integrated into day-to-day life. The Shekhinah is an embodiment of divine femininity, and the Shekhinah has that same property of Shekhinah is from Sheichenes, it's indwelling, it comes down into the world. It doesn't fly off into heaven and escape. It wants to be in the world in a nurturing capacity, taking care of the creation. So those are two very different, like one's going up, one's going down. Now, the truth is when they get married, they both have to take U-turns in order to meet each other in the middle. That's why a chosin is maloshin nechus darga, let's go down a drop. And kala is maloshin klois hanefesh, expiration, going up. So they have to sort of turn from their normal directions and meet each other. But femininity has an anchoring effect on masculinity. At any rate, I'm saying all this as a preface to something very interesting that the Torah tells us it lists the names of all of these spies. It lists them all. These are the names of the men that Hashem sent or had Moshe send. And so in Pasuk Gimel, it says, they were all men, heads of the Jewish people. They were heads of tribes. Kulam anashim. Kulam anashim. What does it mean, kulam anashim? You were all men. So Rashi says that kulam anashim is a lashon cheshivas. Kulam anashim, kol anashim shebemikra lashon cheshivas. V'esa shak shedem hoyu. Rashi says that they were men means they were men. They were mentioned. That means prominent people, respectable people, because at that point, before they chickened out, they were kshedim, they were kosher, they were proper people. But the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah says something. When I saw it the first time, it just blew me away. Kulam anashim. They were such men. They were such men. When they had an opportunity to integrate Judaism into day-to-day mundane life, they were like, I'll pass. They were such men. They didn't get that if you can't integrate Judaism into mundane day-to-day life, you're missing the boat. They thought that they could have a purely spiritual Judaism. Learning, ideas, philosophy, and that they didn't have to deal with, the nitty-gritty, the boring stuff, the very non-glamorous stuff. Kulam anashim, they were such men. So, what does it have to do with grapes? What it has to do with grapes is that the fear of the spies, and ultimately what they succumbed to and why they failed their mission, was that it was not possible to live as loyal Jews while also dealing with the physical world. That was they were dead wrong, and it was a debacle, and it was a tragedy, a bechia l'doros, it calls it, a wailing for the ages. But what was the message to them before they left? The message was, before they even left, Moshe is setting it up, and he's letting them know, listen, you're going to go out and you're going to scout the land. That's your mission. Scouting the land doesn't just mean in that immediate context, the spies scouting the land. Scouting the land is speaking to each one of us. This is Torah's directive to every individual at all times. You look around, you scout out the land, you look at the physical world, and you're trying to decide, is there place in this world for a loyal Jew? And some people come to the conclusion, well, no, and therefore I'm going to sequester myself and I'm going to avoid the world, and I I don't care what happens around me. I'll just build my my own ghetto walls higher and thicker, and let the world be damned because it's irredeemable. That's one attitude. Another attitude is the exact opposite extreme, also unhealthy. If you can't beat them, join them. Okay, fine. So let me go into the world and let me forget about my duties as a neshama, and let me just live it up, try to succeed, have a nice life, become a materialist. And those are both dead wrong. The spiritualist and the materialist are both wrong. The Jewish mission is the integration of both. That's really what Matan Torah was. The revelation at Har Sinai was what the Medrash calls Bittul Agzeda, that there had been a decree since the time of creation that the spiritual and the material could not integrate with each other. They could not blend. And when Torah was given, it gave us the ability to blend the two. How? Through mitzvahs maisis, through physical performance of mitzvahs. Not meditations, not ideas, not spiritual truths, but physical actions which embody these spiritual truths. And that's why Torah was given in this world, not in heaven. That's why Torah was given to souls and bodies, not to angels. The angels wanted the Torah. Hashem said it's not going to work. So the Jews at that time, as well as the Jews today, we're looking around, we're scouting out the land, we're trying to trying to come to a decision whether it is viable to be Jewish in this world. And it's very easy to make one of two extreme mistakes. One is just to renounce the world and avoid the world and try to hide from the world. The other is just throw yourself into the world, become part of the world, become influenced by the world. And in fact, when Jews join the world, you see what always happens. Anytime when Jews become like everybody else, they're never just like everybody else. When the Jews try to show that they're like everybody else, they become the most extreme, most intense version of that. So when a Jew throws himself into the material world, he does it with extra oomph, right? So we're looking around the world and we're trying to assess what's the viability here? How realistic is it to be Jewish in the world? And we say, stop. Before you even leave, before you even begin to gather the data, we want to just cue you in on something. The grapes are in season. What? The grapes are in season? Yeah. These are the days of the ripening of the grapes. What does it mean, these are the days of the ripening of the grapes? Look around the world. The whole world is a grape. The grape with the thin, translucent skin, where if you hold it up to the light, you can see the seed inside. That's a metaphor for this entire world. That if you look at the world, it's covered over with a Clipa. It's got a skin over it. So you look at the world, you don't overtly, immediately see Kedusha, holiness. But you should know, it's not Gimel Clippus Tameus, it's not opaque Clipa, it's not irredeemable Clipa. It's a thin little grape skin Clipa that's translucent. So that if you have imagination and you look for more than a second and you try to see through the facade, you try to see through the veneer, you will perceive there's a spark of godliness in everything, and that's the spark that allows it to be used for the service of Hashem. So it's just like the grape where you can see the seed inside when you hold it up to the light. So too, when you hold up this world to the light of Torah, you can see the seed, meaning the spark inside, the godly, the Dvar Hashem is what we call it, the spark of divine speech, which is Mahave, which enlivens and gives existence to that thing. And you can perceive how this thing, the computer that we're using right now to talk to people who aren't physically here, and the chairs that you're sitting on, and the bricks of the walls around us, and the aforementioned coffee, all this is mundane stuff that we're enlisting, that we're bringing into serving Hashem. So these are all grapes. These are all grapes, because person who doesn't look deeply would just look at it and say, well, it's not holy. It's not holy. Let me run away from it. But a person who has a deeper view looks at it and says, that's a grape, that's a grape, that's a grape, that's, look, hold it up to the light of Torah, and perceive, you can see the core. You can see that there's a spark inside that is useful and can be enlisted in the service of Hashem. So this is what we have to know. That when we go out to scout out the land, each one of us our own personal mission in this world, we have to know that your soul entered the world at what time? At the time when the grapes are in season. The grapes are always in season. The proverbial grapes, what do you say?
Always in season.
Always in season. That's a good title. We'll call it that. Always in season, yeah. So take advantage when Hashem, through Hashgacha Pratis, leads you to a certain opportunity in this physical world to make use of certain resources, or to have a certain possession or a certain wealth or whatever it is. It's not like we have to justify these things and say, well, I'm entitled to a little comfort. I'm entitled to a little, what do you call it, creature comfort. No, we're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to anything. Rather, look at it in a different way. That when I have physical resources, I can serve Hashem with these resources. I can use them as kelim lelokus. I can turn them into vessels for godliness. Because after all, innately they already are sort of primed for that purpose. They're like grapes. You just have to look deeper and see how there's already a godly spark. You just have to be slightly creative to see how to use it. I'll tell you one quick thing. There was a chassid in Shklov named Reb Pinchas, and Reb Pinchas was a big chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, and he had the biggest house in Shklov, and he hated it. He hated it because he was a chassid. He didn't want a big house. He didn't care about a big house. And by the way, I don't know what a big house in Shklov meant 200 years ago. I'm sure we wouldn't be that impressed. But for that time in that place, it was considered a mansion. So he told the Alter Rebbe, he said, I can't stand this big house. I got to get rid of this house. And the Alter Rebbe told him, Reb Pinchas, you have to have a big house. He says, why do I have to have a big house? He says, because your house is the nicest house in Shklov, and then when they need to make meetings, like when they get together and they're going to hire a new malamed or they're going to hire a new shaykhet, they always make the meeting in your house. The parlor meeting. They always make it at your house because you have the nicest house. And since it's in your house, then they end up taking a shaykhet who has Yiras Shamayim and a malamed with Yiras Shamayim. We're taking the right guys. So the fact that all the meetings are in your house, it's affecting the community in such a positive way. So who are you to say you don't want to have a nice house when it has so much benefit to so many other people? So you're going to have to live with it. You're going to have to plug your nose and just deal with having a big house. That's it. We should all have lots of nice material things and use them for the proper things, and have the vision and the creativity to see past the very thin, translucent skin that's covering these things and see to the core, to the seed, the godly spark, and know how to use it in the right way. I had a whole other thing I wanted to tell you, but I realize I don't have time for that.
You don't have time, or we don't have time?
I'll do it. I'll tell you. Want to know one other thing? I'll tell you one other thing. There's an interesting thing here about when did Kaleiv start arguing with the spies? It sort of seems out of place. Pasuk Lamed. Yas Kaleiv es ha'am el Moshe. Kaleiv silenced the nation regarding Moshe. V'yemer ola naile, we will surely go up. V'yorashnu Esau, and we will inherit the land. Ki yachal nuchala, because we can do it. They hadn't yet said they can't do it at this point. So why was he protesting? Why was he objecting? They only say in the next pasuk, we can't do it because the people there are stronger than us or stronger than Hashem. Depends how you read it. So he's arguing with them before they started arguing. And yet he was right. So how did he know, like, he's sort of like preemptively arguing. Like, how did he know they were going in that direction? So I'll tell you something very interesting I saw in a Sikha, in the Rebbe's Sikha. The previous thing about the grape is also in the Rebbe's Sikha, but this is a different Sikha. How did he know what direction they were already heading? If you look at Moshe's request, when Moshe tells the spies what to go look for, Moshe says, Mahi, go see the land, what it is. And the people who are sitting there, who are dwelling there. If they're strong or weak. If they are few or they are many. So he's talking about go find out what kind of people live there. And then Moshe says, Umaha aretz asher hu yeshev. Then find out what the nature of the land is. Hateva hi imra, if it's good or if it's bad. Umaha arem asher hu yeshev beheina. What kind of cities do they dwell in? Habamachanim im bimivtzarim. Are they in like open cities or walled cities, fortresses? So Moshe first says, go find out the people, then the land. Now I know the first thing he says, go find the land, but Rashi explains, aretz here means the effect that the aretz has on the people. There are lands that make people stronger and lands that make people weaker. So the first thing is, the first pasuk, in pasuk Yud Ches, Moshe is saying, find out what kind of people live there. Then the next pasuk, Yud Tes, Moshe says, find out what kind of land it is. Okay? So take note. First, Moshe says, find out what kind of people live there. Then Moshe says, find out what kind of land it is. Now, when they come back and they report, they came back and they said, we went to the land, we're coming from the land that you sent us to. It is flowing with milk and honey. And here's its fruit. And then they start describing the people. But you should know the people there are very strong, and they have big cities, and we saw giants there. So you see, they flipped it. Moshe says, find out the people, and then find out the land. They report, I want to tell you about the land. It's flowing with milk and honey, but the people are very tough. You're not going to be able to beat them. As soon as that happened, Vyas Kaleiv el Moshe. Kaleiv silenced the nation, and he said, hey guys, we can do it. How did he know? They didn't say yet we can't do it. They didn't say we can't do it until the next pasuk. Because here's the lesson. Such an important lesson. Kaleiv already knew these guys were going to chicken out the minute that they mentioned the land before the people. The land is talking about the bounty, what it is that you have to gain. It's flowing with milk and honey. It's such a nice land. The people is the obstacle you have to go through to get to that bounty. These are the people you're going to have to go through. So it means the challenge or the difficulties. When they put the goal, meaning the ultimate reward first, and then the challenges that you need to go through in order to get to the goal second, he knew they were corrupted already. Moshe asked, go find out two things for me. The exact opposite order. He said, find out what kind of people are there, meaning who we're going to be dealing with. Who do we have to fight? And then find out the nature of the land. Is it bountiful? What kind of a land it is. So he said first the challenges you have to go through, and then the end goal or end reward. Let me explain something to you. There's something called extrinsic motivation. There's something called intrinsic motivation. It's been studied. Somebody who does a job because he's being compensated for it is relatively unmotivated. It doesn't matter how sweet you make the reward or how painful you make the punishment. It's an extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic, ex, the Latin root, means outside of, like exit or exodus. So it means that the reason he's doing it is outside of the thing itself. Then there's intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic, in, it means in. Intrinsic motivation means that you value the task itself. So, actually I was interviewed about this in Ami magazine a couple of weeks ago for the Shavuos edition. I stopped writing my column over there, but from time to time they come to me and they ask me different Q&A. So they asked me about telling kids about Gehenna. And I knew what the conversation was going to turn into. Should we talk about more oynish or more schar? And I realized that they're stuck in a loop. It's not like more oynish or more schar. How about neither? You understand? Gehenna is the oynish, is the punishment, right? And then there's Gan Eden, which is the schar. But they're both two sides of the same coin. You keep emphasizing schar and oynish, what we call carrot and the stick, right? So you're leading a mule and you use the carrot, he wants the sweet carrot, and you use that, that's the positive. And then you have the stick, you hit him, that's the negative, right? So you have Gan Eden is the carrot and Gehenna is the stick. But all of this is extrinsic motivation. He's not valuing the job itself. He's doing the job because of he loves the reward or he hates the punishment. So I said to them, instead of asking, should we talk more about Gehenna, less about Gehenna, what's your alternative? Let's stress the positive about the reward. How about let's de-emphasize all reward and punishment? Not that it's not true, chas v'shalom, of course it's true. But the Mishnah says, Al tiyu ka'avodim masham shesarav amanas lakabel pros. Don't be like the servants who serve their master in order to receive a reward. It doesn't say there isn't a reward, chas v'shalom. It just says there shouldn't be the motivation. Don't have that be on your mind. The Alter Rebbe, by the way, says, pros is Melashon prusa. Prusa means like a piece of bread when you cut off a little piece from the loaf. So he says you should know that even the biggest Gan Eden is just a prusa. It's just a piece. It's not the real reward. The real reward is schar mitzvah, the effect that the mitzvah has on making the world a dira b'tachtenim, that we transform this world into a place that's holier than any heaven, right? But your reward in the afterlife, okay, it's nice, but it pales in comparison to the intrinsic value of the project itself. So anyways, I was talking about this in the Q&A, and I told them, you got to give kids an intrinsic motivation. You have to tell them that their mitzvahs have an effect. Instead of saying, well, how much will I get paid if I do it? Or how much am I going to get knast, fined if I don't do it? How about explain to me the importance of the job itself? No, they don't do that. Okay, so it has to be done. And if it's not done, I want to tell you something. The limits of extrinsic motivation always will always surface at some point. Because at some point, the job's just not worth the reward. Or, at some point, the punishment is worth the pleasure of doing the sin. So it's never going to really ensure any type of consistent performance. But when you teach somebody, no, the mitzvah has intrinsic value. The mitzvah is valuable unto itself. The fact that you're also rewarded for it, that's a bonus. That's beautiful. But that's not the reason why we do it. So Kaleiv knew they were corrupted already because they roll in, they're like, oh, first of all, you should know it's a gorgeous land. It's flowing with milk and honey. Oh, but the people there are very strong. They're very hard to defeat. Kaleiv was like, uh-oh, these guys were corrupted already. They're talking about the reward first, and then what you have to go through in order to get to the reward. They already lost. I don't even have to wait for them to say, let's forget it, let's abort the mission, let's not do it, because I already know where they're headed. Because once you put the reward first, then sooner or later, inevitably, you will come to a point where you will say, what I have to go through in order to get it is not worth the hassle. Now, happened to be they came to that point much sooner than later, right away. But Kaleiv knew it's only a matter of time now, because once they're putting the reward first, I know it's inevitable they will come to a point where they'll make an evaluation, and they'll say, it's just too much hassle. It's not worth it. When Moshe sent them, he did the exact opposite. He said, tell me about the people we're going to have to go through to get there. Then tell me about the land that we're going to gain after we've gotten there. In other words, the process and the result are on equal footing. You know, there's an expression, it's not just the destination, it's also the journey, right? So when the value, the intrinsic value of the work itself presents itself as something that's like, not just, oh, this is a necessary evil, I have to go through it in order to get the thing that I really want, but rather the task itself has value. The struggle itself has value. Then it's a whole different level of commitment. It's a whole different level of commitment, because then I appreciate not what am I going to get out of it, and then I'm making an evaluation. Well, is it really worth it? No. This itself is what I'm getting out of it. So if I'm doing a mitzvah and I have to ask myself, well, how good is the schar in Gan Eden really going to be? You know what? I already lost. But if I'm doing a mitzvah and I say, wow, this is beautiful, I'm doing a mitzvah, and even though it's hard, and even though there are challenges, but this is what it's all about. And I'm also getting schar? Okay, that's nice, but you don't even have to talk to me about that right now. It's going to happen anyway. But the fact that I value the job, I value the work. I value the work. I mean, you could go a lot deeper than this. You can compare it to an interpersonal relationship. You know, talk about like spouses, where you know, it's very I don't know, it's almost crass to say it, but you know, think about like a husband and wife. Like, well, you know, if I'm nice to you, if I take you out for dinner, if I buy you a present, you know, what am I going to get out of it? Oh, that's all? It's not worth it. You can't. Like, come on. Like, whatever happened to just bonding for the sake of bonding? No. What am I going to get out of it? Or conversely, you know, and if I don't take out the garbage, what's my wife going to do? Divorce me? So I won't take out the garbage. And by the way, I had somebody say this to me. I'm not making this metaphor up, because a guy actually said this to me. He said, and I'm not going to describe who it was, but somebody who should have known better, a religious person, somebody I consider to be learned, at least in certain areas. And he said to me, well, if you don't emphasize schar v'onish, why would anybody do anything? Why would you do any mitzvahs? If you're not going to get punished for doing avedas, why would you do any mitzvahs? And I said, and if your wife wouldn't divorce you, even if you're mean to her, would you be mean to her? And he's like, well, yeah, that's why you're not mean to your wife, because she would divorce you if you're not. Like, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh my goodness. So this guy's basically saying, you know, don't do avedas because of Gan Eden, and don't be mean to your wife because, you know, she'll leave you. Like, it's hard to wrap your head around that this is the way. But I at the end of the day, I can't really fault this person, because this is how he was trained. This is how he was taught. He was trained with extrinsic motivation. It's all extrinsic motivation. So at any rate, let me put together these two concepts I was telling you about, because actually they're one chapter of Tanya. I told you they're two different sichos from the Rebbe, but they're really one chapter of Tanya. Chapter 10 of Tanya, it talks about the Benealia.
It doesn't have to be such a clear thing. Like, even like they say, watching the kids, right? You think you're doing it for your wife. Like she says, please watch the kids, right? And then you could, if you watch the kids, you could go out with your friends tomorrow, right? It's just not, it doesn't even have to be so clear as that. It could be like, you're going to get, by you watching the kids, you're gaining, like you're giving, no? I don't know.
Well, but even that's an extrinsic motivation, because that's like tit for tat. Like, I do you a favor, you do me a favor.
That's what I'm saying. So then,
So even that's an extrinsic motivation. How about you watch the kids, because, first of all, men always say, I'm babysitting.
Right.
You're babysitting your kids, right? Right. How much you get paid for babysitting? At any
That's
rate,
the point.
yeah,
I'm not saying it right. Okay.
yeah.
You're saying it.
You just do it because it needs to be done, because it's the right thing to do, and you value doing the right thing. It's not what am I going to get out of it. It's not about barter,
Right.
emotional barter. Anyways, the first thing I was talking about was that the world is a grape, and the second thing I was talking about is extrinsic motivation, how it fails us, or the value of intrinsic motivation. So if you look in chapter 10 of Tanya, it talks about both these concepts at the same time. It says that there are people called Bnei Aliyah, very lofty people. Why are they called Bnei Aliyah? For two reasons. One is because they do what they do for the sake of the Most High, L'tzorech Gavaya, like the Shlach calls it. So they serve Hashem for altruistic motives, like the Zohar says, Eizeu chosadim es chasadim kainai. Who is a chasad? One who is kind to his maker. Be kind to Hashem. Like, be a mensch. Hashem wants you to do this, do it for him. Just, what am I going to get out of it? Come on, don't be so crass. Who cares what you're going to get out of it? Hashem asked for it, do it for him. Oh, but I'll get some Gan Eden from it. Stop it already. Just do it for Hashem. Be nice to Hashem. All right, so they're called Bnei Aliyah for that reason, because they do things for the sake of the Most High. They're also called Bnei Aliyah because everything they do is for the sake of, it's called in Kabbalah, halos man, the raising up of the mayin nukvin, of the feminine waters, which means the refinement of the physical world. That everything they do is to cause a hisapcha of chasheichel and to transform dark to light, which means taking mundane things and turning them into spiritual things through using neutral physical objects and enlisting them in the service of Hashem. So these are both reasons why they're called Bnei Aliyah. And the Alter Rebbe there in chapter 10 says that both of these explanations are the same. They're one and the same. They're synonymous. Because at the end of the day, what does it mean to do something for Hashem's sake? It means for the sake of Dira B'Tachtonim. So they're one and the same. If you realize the world is a grape, the world can be refined, the world is redeemable, and its redemption is in your hands through the practical mitzvahs that you perform in this physical world. And at the same time, you realize that the purpose of Yiddishkeit is to serve Hashem. It's not to serve you. It's not a self-help program. It's not for your payoff. It's for Him. It's really one and the same concept. What does it mean to serve Hashem? That means to give Him this world in its ultimate refined form.